I want to thank you for choosing to be with us on this very special night. My name is Michelle DeWitt, and I work for Lifelong Montclair as the Senior Citizens Coordinator, and I'm also one of the co-creators of our first annual Intergenerational Story Slam. We purposefully scheduled this Story Slam as a part of the Bounce Festival, whose mission is to promote resilience and optimism. I can't think of a better example of resilience and optimism than seniors and teens. Seniors who have bounced back from all kinds of adversity, divorce, death, cancer, war, and teens who are the embodiment of hope for our future, whether they choose to believe it or not. These seniors and teens are our very own superheroes in this crazy mixed up world we're living in. Together, they can conquer anything. This project is all about the powerful connections that are made when we share our stories. Sadly, we live in a world that is divided by gender, race, class, religion, political party, and very often by age. As much as technology unites us, it often winds up making us feel more isolated and robs us of the opportunities for real person-to-person conversations and the simple joy of learning about each other through a simple story. I'm delighted that this project brings these two groups together whose paths typically would never cross and has given us the space to have these conversations that would not have happened and stories that would never have been told. This project is a labor of love and would not have been possible without the vision and tenacity of the marvelous Mrs. Mizell. Maciel Rodriguez Vars. Truly, this woman is the Captain Marvel of Montclair. Give her a round of applause. If you don't know her, she's the executive director of the Montclair Fund for Educational Excellence, an independent nonprofit that raises money to empower students, teachers, and funds programs in our district. This is a woman who hears about a project like this one and makes it happen, along with hundreds of other projects just like it. Please give it up for Mrs. Mizell. And to help our seniors, we had our own superhero in Dr. Virginia Cornue. A published author and professor at Bloomfield College, none of this tonight would have been possible without her expertise, feedback, and tremendous empathy. Thank you, Virginia. Finally, this idea was born from a conversation, a simple conversation, not via text, not via email, with my boss, Dr. Katie York, director of Lifelong Montclair, and Maciel, about doing some intergenerational programming. And before I knew it, Montclair High School teachers Jessica Buell and Gustavo Vasquez were brought on board, and we were off and running. Ms. Buell and Mr. Vasquez told us that their 10th graders were studying The Great Gatsby. What if we expanded upon the Gatsby's theme of the American dream? What does the American dream look like to a 15 or 16-year-old looking ahead and to a 70 or 80-year-old looking back? Thank you, Ms. Buell and Mr. Vasquez, for your leadership and for believing in these kids, our seniors, and this project. In the beginning of May, our two groups got together here at the high school to participate in a workshop provided by Montclair-based company Own the Room. During the course of that day, we did team building exercises, we learned about weak language, and we laughed a lot. Most importantly, we learned the secret sauce to great storytelling, getting over ourselves. This is really not about us up here. It's really about you, the audience. So without further ado, we hope you all enjoy these stories tonight as much as our storytellers enjoy sharing them with you. Please help me welcome to our first storyteller to our stage, Dr. Virginia Cornue. Dr. Cornue will be reading the story of her dear friend and story slammer, Linda Lombry, who could not be here tonight due to a death in her family. Virginia Cornue.
And I think we're missing one important person who needs to be thanked, hugged, kissed, thanked again, and that is Michelle DeWitt. So I have to read this. I'm reading Linda Lombry's story, Born in My Heart. From the very bottom of my soul, I always knew I was a mom. From birth, I have no doubt. But I didn't know my baby would be born in my heart, not from my womb. Several threads weave my story together. Most have to do with family or exploring new paths in life, despite my inherent shyness. I was fascinated with how my grandparents and great-grandparents came to America. They traveled from Ireland, Italy, and the Basque region of Spain, risking everything to begin again. My journey would be different, but with one common thread: family. Being a mom was a given in my DNA. I was that little girl who loved playing with my family of dolls. I was fascinated and thrilled when my little sister was born just before I turned 4, my baby. I still remember our first moments, that baby powder smell, the pink blanket fuzz between her tiny fingers, the softness of her palm. Soon she was joined by cousins, lots of cousins, lots and lots of first cousins, 30 in all. During adolescence, when I was certain I'd become a nun, I planned to join the Mary Knowles sisters, missionaries who cared for children. A little later, I wanted to be a pilot or a teacher or a Navy nurse like my Aunt Lou, or a mystery writer like Carolyn Keene, author of Nancy Drew books. But children of my own were a someday given. Then I learned my Aunt Connie's 2 sons had been adopted, and my best friend down the block was a foster child, still yearning for her birth mother. Birth mother, adoptive mom, new terms that resonated. Dad's parents, Carmela and Luigi, gave us kids a rich tapestry of culture, flavors, and sounds in our large, boisterous family in their home in the Bronx. Flavored with Italian expressions and eating, always lots of food. Some Sundays we'd take the L to Astoria to see my mom's parents, Bernadine and Jack, and other relatives who were visiting. Mom's siblings had all married spouses from Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Lithuania, Malta, Poland, Germany, and on and on and on. It was a colorful patchwork. They all had their own ways of talking, peppered with flavorful expressions. Would you mind me staying for supper? Have a little nosh. Hey, Slan, see you soon. Gaelic for so long. A rich childhood with family at its center, and babies, lots of babies. In my 40s, I remained the only cousin not married. Yet the dream, no, the reality of being a mother was still strong in my heart. 2 close friends had created families via adoption. They inspired and cheered me on. My daughter, imagined and born in my heart, came to me after a long journey. I knew she was out there somewhere. When my dad died, I prayed to him, asking him to look around heaven, find the soul of my daughter, and take care of it. He did. One sunny afternoon, around 3, the door to my hotel room in Hefei, China, opened. A smiling woman walked in carrying a calm 7-month-old baby girl. I smiled, ni hao, as I gathered her into my arms. Little Xu Jing looked up at me, waving her bitsy fingers in that come-to-me gesture babies make. My heart skipped a beat. I thought it would burst. I named her Anita Michelle, for my parents, Anthony and Juanita, and my sister and niece, whose middle names were Anne and Michelle. I brought my daughter home to America to continue the family tradition of new beginnings. This time, my daughter, who had lived in my soul and imagination for so long, and who was born in my heart instead of my womb, embarked with me on a new adventure. We're family, formed and joined by 2 hearts that pump love and life. We've emigrated to each other and a new life, just as my grandparents did so long ago. It's no wonder that Anita began her college essay with, "I am an immigrant and the great-granddaughter of immigrants." And as for me, I am a mom. All is well with the world.
Thank you, Virginia. Our next story slammer comes to us from Montclair High School. Please welcome to the stage Destiny David.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So racism, something that I knew kind of happened but didn't really understand. I grew up in Montclair and I had no trouble making friends. So growing up here was kind of easy. But then I started to lose friends very quickly. And I became kind of lonely, which was kind of hard for me to deal with. The only person I really had at that time was my mom. And I became kind of really fragile, which is something that I don't like to admit. From this, I had to learn how to fake confidence and how to put up a front. For those who don't know, I love to do theater, actually on this stage right here. So putting up a front for me was really easy. As an actor, you have to learn how to remove yourself and put yourself in a different role and become that person. So essentially, I kind of wasn't Destiny David on the stage currently. I recently looked at my old playbill from 7th grade, and I did not recognize the person that I saw. I had pin straight hair covering one eye. I had a very basic black choker, and I wore all black. If that isn't stereotypical emo, I don't know what is. In 8th grade, we took a trip to Washington, D.C., and I was really excited about this because my uncle owns a hotel in Washington, so I go there all the time. So being there kind of made me feel a little bit more secure. We got there June 14th, immediately starting to see the different sites to see, which was something new for me because anytime I go there, I usually go to visit family. The next day, we went to a mall center to get lunch. And I remember I went to Chipotle and got a burrito with extra guac, and I got guac all over my hands, so I had to go to the bathroom to clean myself. My friends tagged along and put their stuff next to me. As I was washing my hands, a random lady came up to me and told me to leave because people like me don't belong in Trump's land. Hearing this was really hard. because I usually don't witness racism. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't move. All I could do was blink, and people around me were trying to understand what was happening, but I couldn't tell them because I just couldn't get the words out. I think that I kind of took it way better than I would have now, because now that I've witnessed it a lot more, I think it's taken a bigger toll. I kind of, in that moment, was witnessing sleep paralysis, but I was still awake, which is a really weird feeling. As soon as I snapped out of it, I called my mom, and I was crying and crying because I felt like not only did I let my race down, but I let myself down by not standing up to the lady. I could tell on the phone that my mom didn't know what to say. She started with confronting me and trying to make me feel better, but she continued with saying that racism is just a thing that happens, it's just a matter of how you deal with it. And that's when I kind of realized that me growing up in Montclair kind of put me in a bubble. Being in Montclair, you have the privilege of being in a very diverse community, and schools are well integrated, and it kind of blocks out all prejudice, in a sense. I still don't perfectly know how to feel about the comment that was made, and I don't really feel like you can truly understand racism unless you've witnessed it firsthand. In my kind of kid-friendly mind, I thought that racism was a huge thing back then, but thanks to people like Dr. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, it wasn't a huge thing anymore. I guess that kind of goes to show how gullible I was. Thank you.
Thank you, Destiny. Wow, it feels good, doesn't it? Feels good. Good job. Let's bring up our next story slammer. Please help me welcome to the stage Gabrielle Whitlock.
You can hear me? Yes, okay, good. Okay. Okay, let me start. Okay. So about 4 years ago, I moved from Antigua on July 10th, 2015. And I don't know if you know where Antigua is. It's in the Caribbean. Not many people know that. But I know Antigua's not that great. Sorry, just letting you know now. Oh, sorry. So living in Antigua wasn't really a choice. It was kind of chosen for me because unfortunately when I was 2, my father passed away, and so my mother, she had a traveling job, so she sent my twin sister and I to Antigua to live with my grandma, and so we lived there for about 10 years, and I moved here when I was 12. So living in Antigua, everyone thinks it's like a dream and like you have everything great and it's always sunny and happy, but honestly, the government is a big part of it, and it's always messes up everything. There's no sidewalks. There's always crime. The school system doesn't set you up for anything. There's always homophobic people everywhere just constantly saying nonsense for no reason when nobody chose to be like that, but okay. There's just always, I just knew when I lived there, I just felt like I wasn't supposed to be there. And so when I first came to visit, I remember I was like 10, and I came to visit my mom, because my sister and I would visit my mom every summer, winter, sometimes Easter. And so I remember I came to visit here, and I just remembered I met my best friend. No, because I used to live here in Montclair, and I had friends here in Montclair and East Orange. And so I would go to my East Orange friend's house when I come to visit in the winter. And so America was so fun. Everything was just great. The air was magical. There were sidewalks. There was Chuck E. Cheese. They had McDonald's. They had everything. I felt like I was living the best part of my life. I thought it was great. So just moving here, in 7th grade, in 2015, I moved here, and I thought I would be in the magical life that I expected, because I always saw in the movies the girls loved the cultured girls who taught an accent and everything, so I thought I was going to be living life. And so I came in 7th grade, and I remember I had on this really ugly shirt, this really ugly floral shirt, and I came in thinking I was the cutest thing ever. And I started talking to my teacher, and she couldn't understand anything I was saying, because I had the strongest accent. Sometimes I still have an accent, but she couldn't understand a word I was saying, and it was so frustrating. I thought, because in the movies, they showed me that everybody was loving me, so I thought I would be loved. And so I couldn't communicate. I felt like no one even tried to talk to me. That's what pissed me off. Not sorry. That's what angered me the most. It was like everyone just pushed me to the side. And I was like, and it just felt so strange, because this was the first time in my life, really, that I was ever like apart from my sister, because me and my twin sister had every class together. So just being apart from her and not being able to communicate with her and tell her that they're all not listening to me I was so frustrated. And then coming here and living here, I've been here for almost 4 years, and just realizing, America, they don't tell you everything in the movies. The movies, they just kind of scam me, to be honest. I feel like I was conned. They don't tell me about all this anti-Semitism. First of all, I didn't even know about the Holocaust, I'm not gonna lie. When I first came here, I didn't even know what it was. And so I didn't know about all the white supremacy. I didn't know about all the racism that I guess I saw when I was a child, but I never knew it was so prominent. Wow, it's just a really big shock, because I had this American dream that I was gonna be living in the movies. And now, I just really can't even figure out my dream. I'm still trying to figure out what I really think my dream is, because it's been changed so much. Because I feel like the American dream, when people from Antigua would come here, would be for opportunities and to be happy and be wealthy and have all your family and friends. But everyone here just values money. That's just, everything is about money here. No one seems to enjoy anything. And I honestly think my American dream would just to enjoy my life and enjoy everything around me and just be happy, not worrying about anything at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabrielle. Our next story slammer is another Montclair High School student. Please help me welcome Luis Vargas. Make sure you keep the mic really close to your mouth so that we can hear you, okay?
Okay. Right. Hello. Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. Okay. Hello, everybody. This is my first year at Montclair High School. It's been okay. It's been good, actually. It's been really good this year. It's been really good this year. The reason I came to Montclair was, I moved from East Orange to Montclair to get a better education, I guess. Yeah, better education, diversity, I guess. But I left all my friends over there. This year has been rough a bit, and The reason I moved to Montclair was because I got jumped over there in East Orange. 5 adults. Is over there. It's between East Orange and Orange. It was yeah. Oh, my American dream. My American dream was my parents had 6 brothers. I'm the 7th, yes. All of my brothers are professions. My brother is an accountant. My sister's a therapist. My brother's police. I guess I want to be something good, I guess. Yeah. That's all, I guess.
Good job. Thank you, Luis. Our next story is of a girl lost in an unkind world who finds love and meaning and truth in unexpected places. Please welcome to the stage Marilyn Snadjer with her story, Illegitimate.
Oh. Okay. Hi.
We're going to put it like that so they could see you. Can you do that? Can you glance up this way?
Okay, I'll try that. Illegitimate. I am a bastard. Oh. Should I give that again? Yes. Illegitimate. I am a bastard. Let me say, I truly believe that the child can present an accurate account of life happenings. And these are the things I remember. I know we moved away from Buffalo, New York when I was 4. I remember my mother took me on my first ever bus ride before we left. It was memorable because I got throw-up sick, and from the fumes and the lurching bus, we had to get off one bus and get on another one later on. And I also remember the bus driver was involved in that decision. My mother had brought along my baby stroller. When I first saw it outside the house, I was surprised, scared. I was insulted. It was rigid metal with a metal tray and a wooden handle that had no explanation. Once we got off the bus, my mother told me to get into the stroller. I was too big to thread my legs through, so I sat crunched in the seat with my legs folded hard against my chest, my first ever yoga pose. Then my mother told me to yell, "Daddy." This was a word I had never used. So I tried it out, but apparently I wasn't loud enough. So my mother yelled out, "Daddy." A man came down the sidewalk towards us. "Is this the girl?" he asked. My mother answered, "What do you think?" "Don't come back here," he said, and he turned and walked away. Then my mother yelled, "It's a free country. I can go wherever I want." Like the loud words I heard echoed, it arced over the city street and over me. My mother was the housekeeper for a man named Moses Lumley Norton, but because I knew him since I was a baby, I always called him Momo. He was retired, and he had decided to buy a 3-story Victorian house next to an old girlfriend in a Western New York farming community. My mother and I lived there on the main floor. One day, when I was about 8, a woman rang the front bell. I answered the door, and she asked for my mother by name. My mother came into the front hall and asked the woman what she wanted. "Is this the girl?" she asked. My mother confirmed I was the girl, then told the woman to leave and never come back. After she left, I asked my mother who it was, and she informed me it was her mother, my grandmother. My mother drove us to the west side of Buffalo and parked in front of a house. She told me this was where I was born, the Ingleside home for unwed mothers. While she saw a memory, I was looking at a Victorian house somewhat similar to the one we lived in. She said it looked nothing like our house. I pointed out the porches and the green and white porch awnings. They were exactly the same. She said they were not. My mother told me it was where she had planned to give me up for adoption, but that she had changed her mind. Now she wanted me to see where I'd come from. With no actual relatives outside of my mother, I accumulated my own sets of people. My teachers, my doctor, and my neighbors were always generous and showed up even before they were needed. Momo was also available for mile-long walks and helping me collect my accumulation of wild plants for my little garden. Because he had been born before the 20th century, he acknowledged no such thing as protected plants, although we did carry them home in cloth bags. So my jack-in-the-pulpits thrived and grew 3 feet tall. Plus, I got to be an outlaw. By the time I became a real flower child, the illegitimate term moved towards passé and maybe even became badge-worthy. In 2005, the National Geographic Society's genographic launch provided me with DNA results. I could bypass the people I knew about and go straight to the beginning. My people's origins were in Africa, the cradle of civilization. And from there, they eventually traveled north to Europe. Now, here I am, eons later, on the North American continent with you. Illegitimate with a grace. Thank you.
Nope. All right, we're gonna get back to some kids. Our next story slammer is another Montclair High School student. Please help me welcome Kairi Alexandre. You're the next contestant. We're choosing these sort of randomly now, so anybody could be next. Just try to talk right into the mic, like right into it, so that they can hear you. Okay? Just breathe. You'll be fine.
Thanks. I'm too small. Okay.
So you can just talk right into it, like right into it.
Okay. Hi. Hi. When I was little, I lived in New York City. I went to an elementary school named PS 85 in Queens Astoria. I was the first Black person in my school, not only that, but female. And also my principal was female and Black. Her name was Miss Chang. When I went to school, I was always called to the office. It was, Kairi, can you please come to the office? Miss Chang needs to see you. Please go to the auditorium. And I was going there for candy. That's how I viewed it. I viewed it as going to candy and just her talking to me. And now that I look back, I see that she was trying to make me feel more comfortable because I think she felt like I didn't feel like I had anybody else around me. But in reality, I had no other worries than every other kid in my school. Nobody looked at me differently. They just loved my personality and they loved who I am. So I had two best friends. They were like my ride or die, Sophia and Julia. And I would go back to class and I would get candy for them. And everybody would always ask me like, oh, why'd you go to the office? Because when you went to the office, you was in trouble or you was either going home early. And I was not going there for either that. And they would ask me, and I was just walking the room all cocky, like, I just chilled. We was just talking. Like, I thought, like, I was cool or whatever. But it wasn't really that serious. They just laughed with me, and we was chill. I wasn't, like, sad or anything. Everyone was from different races, too, just not mine. But I didn't have any other worries that they needed to worry about. I went in the playground and I played with them. I played tag. I did everything. But the only thing was that I didn't wear a uniform, and it was a uniform school. That was the point when I was being called to the office, not for candy anymore, but being in trouble. And so first it was a warning, and then it was a call home, and then it was a meeting. So then Miss Chang finally met my mom. Hey, Mom. And they had a little agreement that she felt like I was trying to express myself, because I told her that because I felt like I needed to be more different. Like I wasn't aware how different I already was. So I love to wear whatever I want because I love fashion and I love art and I love expressing myself in that way, and I've been doing that since I was little. So also I was an exceptional student, always on honor roll. I did my work and everything. So she just came to agreement to tell me, okay, I could wear whatever I want. And a 5 or 6-year-old was able to make a little, but kind of in a way, a big change of changing the whole school's uniform policy just because I wanted to be different and I wanted to express myself. And that's me, trying to find ways of having people restricting me on what I want to do. And that's what I feel like people that come to America, they have that dream is where they was being restricted and they couldn't do what their passion was telling them to do. So they come over here. And that's what I plan on doing till I grow old. Thank you.
Thank you, Kairi. All right, next up, give it up for Gabrielle Diaz. Yeah. You got this. You want to get off now? I don't need off now. Sorry. Just keep it right up.
Okay. Hi. Okay. So it was 2013, which was a really big year for me when I lost my grandmother to cancer. I was only 10 years old. And usually when I talk about this topic, I get teary-eyed or people say they can't imagine being in my position. But I don't really think that's true because loss, it's universal. We all go through it eventually. And grief has become somewhat uncomfortable. And I want to make the uncomfortable comfortable again. And usually talking to strangers, it's somewhat comfortable. And talking to your family members, maybe they aren't ready yet to hear the truth about what happened. So I remember when I was going through my dreams the night that it happened, I was walking up those old creaky steps again of her house, and I got the smell of her, and it hit me immediately as soon as I walked in. It was mothballs, and it was all over the place. And I remember that I had walked up to the dining room, and there was the remnants of Christmases and Thanksgivings from years before, and the dining room was connected to the living room where there were 2 big dusty couches, and that's where me and my brother used to jump on and eat her home-cooked meals. There wasn't much advice that my grandmother could have gave me when I was younger because I wouldn't retain much of the information, but it was more her actions that spoke louder than her words. She was kind to everyone, and a stranger wasn't a stranger, they were family. She had climbed up the ladder of life and never let anyone push her down. She was always stable in what she was doing. She knew exactly where she wanted to go, and she was spontaneous and it was something that I wanted to live up to. She had raised my mom, who's one of the strongest people I know now, and she helped my dad and loved him from the very beginning, which is something I love because I love my dad. And now in 2019, I'm living my best life, and I have amazing friends who I go out to dinner with, and I have dinner and I have fun with my family, and I work very hard in school and outside activities. But I would never say that I moved on, because it's such an awkward phrase, moving on. It's like you moved on from those feelings of anger or sadness or grief that you went through, but you don't want to move past those because there's something that makes you stronger, and those are definitely moments that made up my life and who I am today. Because a couple of years ago, I wouldn't have known that I would be standing on this stage or I would be telling this story today, and you wouldn't really know unless you were on the stage with me. And we have to understand that not everything in our life goes the way that we want it to, and all we can do is remind ourselves that this is life, and not everything is what we want it to be, but we work harder for it. And the one thing that we can do for each other is be there, because eventually we'll smile more and we're going to laugh more and move forward from these moments. And who I am is made up today because of my grandma, because she worked so hard and was so kind to everyone, that now I want to help others work through their grief. And that's what my American dream is, because I want to help everyone understand that you never move on and you always move forward. No matter what pushes you or tries to make you unstable in the moment, working hard equals big success. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabrielle. All right, you know who's next. Well, he knows who's next because he told me he wants to be next. So I will take requests. Our next story slammer, help me welcome to the stage Nasir Robinson. He should be right here.
All right, this is not my phone, so. Okay, I have stage fright, so I'm just trying to get it over with. All right, so I moved to Montclair from Orange. I used to go to school in Orange, and I used to get into a lot of fights or whatever. So my mom had to send me to Montclair because it was a lot going on, especially with Orange and East Orange. So they was just jumping anybody, like whoever from each town. So it was like a lot of that. So I moved to Montclair. And it's a nice school, whatever. Like, I mean, you get your education, then you go home. Like, yeah, it is boring. You know, but being a teenager isn't. You know, school gonna be boring. Like, you're not gonna want to go to school. Like, but you gotta do what you gotta do to succeed in life. And I want to be a therapist, but I don't know why. Every time when I say it, I don't know why people laugh, but I don't know. But yeah, that's it.
Thank you. I actually am curious to know what kind of therapist. I just want to know, a physical therapist or like a mental, like a psychotherapist. All right, good. All right, look out for him. He's coming to help you. All right, we're going to change the order a little bit, and we're going to, where did I put you? Number 7. There she is. Cheyenne Davis, come on up.
Hi, I'm Cheyenne. It's nice to meet you all. So, I do not believe in the American dream, But if I did have an American dream, it would be about my hair. From the time I was younger to now, my hair has been one of the biggest changes that I've gone through. In the summer of 4th grade, my mom dreaded my hair. And it was probably one of the worst and the best decisions ever. I remember crying about it. I remember hating it because my dad hated it, and it was a way for me to get closer by having something to agree with him on. I remember getting bullied by it. I remember people, like, as I got older, people telling me, oh, you didn't look like this when your hair was short. I remember everything that I went through just because I had dreads. And if I wouldn't have had them, I wouldn't have been going through the things that I went through in middle school. And then summer before high school came, I was sick of being the same person. I was sick of having the same hairstyles. I was sick of not being able to have the straight hair, the straight weaves that you saw in the movies. I was sick of not be able to have braids like my sister, being able to have be able to change my hair at any point and not regret it. So one week, I took it upon myself to cut my hair out. My mom was angry. She didn't tell me anything that had to do with it. She just let me do it, no matter how many times I asked her, was this the right decision? And trust me, it was probably the worst decision I've ever made. Because now that I have hair, I have to wake up, I have to do it. I have to wear a scarf every night. I can't just go get into a pool with my regular hair. There's no more standing outside in the rain because I have to worry about being puffy. There's no being like everybody else because not everybody has the same hair texture. And now that I know that, I've learned that I used to want to be like everybody else. And now that I know that I have something that sets me apart from everybody else, but also makes me like the same as everybody else, I know that this is something that I'll continue to do no matter how much crying, how much yelling, how much money I have to pay for it. Like even before coming here, it took me 2 hours to do my hair and 5 minutes to pick out my outfit. I changed my hair 3 times and changed my outfit once. What I come to say is that you have to accept change, and you have to accept the fact that not everything that you do is supposed to look like everybody else. And that's what I've learned from my hair.
All right, I can relate. I should have gotten a haircut before I agreed to do this. All right, so our next story slammer. Like many first-generation American families, our next slammer was raised on a healthy dose of tradition and storytelling. Put your hands together for story slammer Marie Claire Hepp and her story, The Legacy.
So I don't trip. I will. What did you have to eat, Dad? It was early morning, around 7, and I was calling my dad, who was in the hospital. But he couldn't tell me, so I knew something was really wrong. 'Cause one thing about Dad was that he really loved his food. So much so that Dad had this habit that he never talked while he was eating. But as soon as he wiped his mouth with his napkin and he put down his knife and fork, then the stories would start to roll. But this time, there was something different. So I jumped in the car and I rushed over to the hospital. It was before visiting hours, but I managed to get in to see him. Dad was just sitting there in the hospital bed with the tray of food in front of him, the cover still on, nothing was touched. I tried to coax him into eating something, but he wasn't having any of it. So I just sat down in the chair opposite Dad, and I just sat there staring at him. Dad had no appetite for the food now.
He was 3 months away from dying from prostate cancer that had metastasized to his bones. His interest was in telling me the stories. There were a litany of stories that Dad had told me over the years, over and over again, to the point where I would say to him, Dad, how many more times are you going to tell me these same stories? I've heard them 1,000 times. The stories about his life. At the age of 3 in Hungary, losing his father to the First World War and becoming head of the family. Later, at the age of 7, being sold a horse that he didn't recognize was lame and useless for plowing the fields. Then he was forced to serve in the Hungarian army during the Second World War, only to be captured by enemy soldiers, but he miraculously managed to escape. And he walked his way back to his village disguised as a farm worker, a journey that took him 2 months, and one of the very few men who ever made it back to the village. And when he finally did make it home, I remember my dad telling me that he silently stood at the back farmhouse door. It was lunchtime, and he overheard his mother scolding my brother, saying, "Your poor father would love to have this soup, so appreciate how lucky you are, and eat some of it right now." But then she noticed someone standing at the open door. And she said to my mother, "Give the poor beggar some soup, he looks hungry." My dad looked so pitiful, no one recognized him. And so my mom walked over with the soup, but she suddenly dropped the bowl when my dad looked up from under his cap and, seeing his face, realized this was her husband, my father, standing there, and not a beggar at all. Years later, the deaths of 2 of his sons, my brothers, followed, one at the age of 4 from measles, and the other at 2 weeks, who was born premature. They were both named Michael, after the father my dad never knew. Next, being forced to leave Hungary and having to leave the house that was built by my great-grandfather, the livestock, farmland, and personal belongings behind. Afterwards, working for the American soldiers while in exile in Germany, and trading in the chocolates that he received for potatoes that would be cooked as the evening meal for me and my brother Frank. I remember my mom always telling me how Dad would wait until she, my brother, and I had finished eating before he would take a bite. Finally, starting over again, this time in the States, not knowing any English, working any jobs he could get, to pay off the debt to his in-laws who had paid the passage for our family, and whose motivation was totally mercenary. They were very unkind. Yada, yada, yada. These stories just went on and on. But this time was different. I remember sitting in the hospital room feeling as if I had never heard these stories before. This time, instead of one or another story being told after dinner while still sitting at the table, my dad was telling his life story in one litany of remembering, the Cliff Notes version, and I was the only one there to hear these unbelievable things about loss and survival and starting over again. I remember how I wished I had a tape recorder to capture each word. And then I realized there really was something different. Only there wasn't anything in Dad that had changed. I was the one who had changed. This time, I didn't ask Dad to stop. This time, I was ready, and I felt so privileged to listen. Dad's been gone now for over 20 years, and now I'm the one remembering the stories and telling them to my nephews and their children, my great nieces and nephews who never got to know Dad. Because Dad's legacy is the stuff that movies are made of. His stories deserve to be told. And now I'm so very glad that Dad told me these stories over and over again. So, take a lesson from Dad, and don't talk while you're eating. There's always time after the meal to tell your story.
Thank you, Marie Claire. Fantastic. All right, let's get back to some students. Please help me welcome to the stage Malcolmb Graves. Is that okay? Do you want to hold it or? Okay, just hold it real close. We can hear you.
Good afternoon. I'm Malcolmb Graves. My story, I'm gonna just hold it. My story starts in Alabama. My earliest memory is when I was 5 years old, riding down a huge hill on the top of our block on a scooter, fast pace. You know, really not holding on to the brakes. I hit a rock, and I had fell over the scooter and scraped up all the way my entire leg and half my face. All I remember was the adrenaline, fat tongue. That's all I remember was just the rush. And just seeing a lot of blood. I just laughed and cried, and my mom patching me up. Coming to Montclair was different. Seeing the diversity on each block, seeing the different students, different skin tones on each classroom was different. No, it's not all the same color, it's just different color. Hear different accents, different voices, sort of talk to different students. I had a strong Southern accent. I said y'all like crazy. And it was just like, that's not a word. It is a word. But it was the way how I spoke. It was the way how I perceived things. I talked as I knew a million words when I really knew none. My family would say that I had an old soul for a young body. I was just really country, as they would say. I came to Montclair High School last year, right before winter break. Originally, I was in Belleville High School for a couple of months. It was a change, really, because over at Belleville, the minority is just white. So coming here and seeing a lot of old friends and realizing that there's more out there is just a realization. You realize that there's more to grasp and more to understand. Keep saying it's my second year now, hanging still with the same squad, got the same friends, but come to more understandings. I think that's what my generation does. We understand a lot more and we perceive a lot more. We grow up faster, but we don't take a lot that we learn from. We try to get out of high school as fast as we can without really understanding the stuff we are in high school for. But hey, it's high school, it's boring, right? Shoot. Teenagers, that's what we all call it, boring. I don't know, I just want to spend my life right now. Shoot, I'm 16, just want to keep it moving. But I need to slow it down, that's what my family tells me. Just need to calm down, just live in the moment, You know what they say, just look at the horizon and see the sunrise. Don't really learn how to do that yet, right? But hey, it's what I'm here to learn for. That's me.
You got to give these kids a lot of credit. It's really hard to get up here. And I'm going to remember that sunset. That was excellent. All right, our next story slammer, Leah Lopes.
Hi. I'm Leah. You just heard her say that. So, I'm light-skinned, which you probably noticed. But as a light-skinned female in this time and age, I'm constantly getting the question, you know, what are you? What are you mixed with? And it always seems to come to surprise that I'm not mixed at all. Both of my parents are African. Well, they're Cape Verdean. The Cape Verdean Islands is a set of 10 islands located on the western coast of Africa. So both of my parents were raised there and later went on to meet in the US. But my father was born in Europe, which is, like, to be more specific, Holland, and then moved to Cape Verde around the age of 5 or 6. So hearing this when I was younger, I started to think that I was European. And I thought it would be easier to explain to people, because when I would say I was Cape Verdean, the following question would always be, what's that? Like, I've never heard of that. Because at the time, it wasn't like all that, I don't know, not a lot of people knew about it, but, and then I would have to go into a long description on what Cape Verde is, where it is, you know, what's it about. So when I found out my dad was European, I would just tell people I was European and African. And, you know, it's not my proudest moment, but, you know, right there and then, that cut out me having to explain, because I would just be like, yo, I'm a European and African, so I don't have to explain anything else. And, you know, I think that was just me being lazy. But I also think it gave me this feeling of fitting in more, because when someone sees a light skin like me and asks these questions, they expect, you know, like, I'm 2% this, I'm 30% this, I'm like 40% this. And I thought that as a light skin, I had to live up to that. And that's what makes living in America so conflicting as a light skin who isn't mixed, because people feel the need to categorize and classify where you belong based on how you look. And I noticed that this is because of how media portrays different races and what they should look like. And what sometimes isn't realized is that everyone won't all look the same. Like, they won't all have the same features based on where they're from, you know? And, you know, going through these experiences and learning, growing from them, I realize now that I am a Cape Verdean, African-American, light-skinned, young adult.
Thank you, Leah. Yeah. Is your dad here yet? No? All right, we have to do this. Our next slammer, this is a perfect segue. Our next slammer explores her complicated identity through laughter and tears. With her story, Laugh or Cry, Can Dreams Coexist? Please help me welcome Dee Mingo Clark.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that really was a perfect segue. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, because I too have struggled with my identity. I'm a bit of a tossed salad myself. I'm have DNA of African, Irish, Latino, and Native American flowing through my body and my mind. It's a mixture that leads to a lot of interesting family stories, some of which make me laugh and some of which make me cry. One of the funny ones is of my paternal grandmother, my Irish, old, green-eyed, gray-haired, wrinkled, sort of turkey-necked, bend-over lady that put fear in the hearts of many business associates. She was what was called a numbers runner, which is basically a petty criminal and loan shark. So, and what was truly interesting, I am told, right, and believe, that just hearing her wheeze and the snort, smelling that lilac perfume, right, or seeing that short, fat shadow waddling towards you could strike such fear into the hearts of even grown, hardened criminals that they would lose bladder control. Right? But when Waddles McAllister paid you a personal visit, soiled undies, least of your worries. Okay? Waddles had grown up as a tomboy in East Harlem. She outwitted her playmates, her brothers, and eventually her husband. Waddles survived and succeeded by her wits, along with her business enforcers, which were her two conniving daughters and 3 malicious sons, the youngest of which was my dad, by her Latin lover. When my dad met my mother, he was 24 and a soldier. She was 17 and a high school senior. Right? Needless to say, that liaison was opposed by both grandparents. In fact, it was my maternal grandmother, Jewel, who was the most upset and the most anxious to put a halt to that relationship. Not just because of her daughter's age, but because of who my father was. A criminal, an Irish gangster. She didn't even like his ethnicity. Indeed, Jewel had already had a rift with her family because she married, outside of her heritage, a bright and upcoming young man of African descent. So, when she saw this relationship budding, she said, no way, and she was determined to put an end to it. You see, Jewel had been taught of her Cherokee heritage. She had even visited the land where her ancestors had been driven to after being pushed out of their original home. They had been taken there by force on what was called the Trail of Tears, where many of them died. Jewel was aware of her heritage. She had been informed that then they're leaving their designated homeland called reservations would cost them. They'd pay in taxes, in services, and in safety. Well, what the Europeans called colonialization, her ancestors called invasion. Jewel thought the very people who turned her ancestors' dreams into nightmares, how could she let their blood become part of her family? How could she fix this? She didn't know, and that made me cry and think of a poem by Langston Hughes, What Happens to a Dream Deferred? If it's deferred, denied, demolished, it'll die. But unfortunately, it may also take the dreamers with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dee. Are we ready? Yes? Dad's here? All right. Help me welcome to the stage Rhea Habanen. Hold it. Oh, no. Hold it.
Thank you. Okay. So I live in Montclair with my dad, my mom, and my two sisters. I would say I'm just like everybody else who lives in Montclair. I go to school, I have friends, and I have a house. Except one thing, I'm adopted. You think that when you're born, the person you've birthed, you won't leave. Let me tell you something. When they leave, you feel this emptiness. It doesn't matter why they left. It's just that they left. I knew I was adopted right away. I knew I wasn't like others. The kids in my pre-K class would be the same color as their parents, and they didn't talk about adoption. They didn't have adoption day like I did. I didn't care that I was a different color at first until I started to get comments. My parents were always open with me about my adoption. That didn't prepare me for some of the questions, the stares, and the rude comments I would get. Is that your mom? Are you guys together? Are you related? I mean, how could people be so ignorant? Not even think there's a possibility that I could be related to this woman. Sometimes I get the dumbest comments. I'm never gonna forget, I went to the dry cleaners with my mom. I'm standing in line with her. The woman at the cash register looks over and says, "Oh, is that your neighbor?" This woman didn't even think there's a possibility I could be related to her. And instead of saying like niece or something like that, she went to neighbor. Like, who brings their neighbor to the dry cleaners? That's dumb. My mom got her clothes and left the store. The first thing I asked is, why would she ask that? I had no idea. I just assumed she knew that she was my mom. I knew she was my mom, even though we weren't the same skin color. I don't understand why it's so hard for everybody else to see that you don't have to be the same skin color as somebody. Comments that continue to throw me off my course are comments about my identity. Oh, you're not a real black person. You live with white people. Oh, you're not a real black person. You've never celebrated Christmas the way black people do. How does celebrating something make you African American? I think that I know that I'm black. I know that I'm African American. Just because I live with white people does not change that. I get so angry at people for making these comments, and instead of being able to explain the way I feel, I take it out on my parents. When I know there's nothing they can do, and I know that they actually saved me, I just get so upset. I've never really thought about the American dream until now. I used to always say the American dream is the same for everyone. Come to think of it, it's not.
For some people, the American dream could be just making it through high school. My American dream is all about breaking the cycle. My birth mom had 3 children, all before 21. 3 children, all different fathers. She never finished high school because she had children to take care of. She didn't have a lot of support and was never really stable. Picture it, your mom so young, didn't finish high school and kept having more kids, never got stable, was hopping from house to house so she could live. It got so hard for her that she made a bad decision and lost her parental rights. I had to go into the foster care system. That really messed me up. You think you have someone forever, and then just like that, they're gone. When they leave you, you're empty. Here I am, 16 years old, almost 14 years later, and I still can't trust anybody. Growing up, I've always had this feeling that I'm going to be betrayed. I'm going to be that girl that no one wants and who gets left behind. I would say my American dream is to graduate college and to become what I want to be in life. This would be breaking the cycle. I want to show that no matter how you start in life, as long as you finish is what matters. I'm not close to finishing, but I know I'll get there someday. I'll get there because I have my amazing parents and my amazing sisters.
Thank you. Our next story slammer, help me welcome Carolina Mendez Luegos.
Okay, hi. So I'm a little nervous right now because I gotta speak out loud in English, and and that's what my story's about. So moving from Europe to the U.S., it was a great change, not because I had to change schools and neighborhoods, but I was changing country and continent, language, friends. Everything was new. I was 13 back then. I was lucky enough to know how to speak in English. Like, my parents always made sure I knew. So yeah, I moved to Duma High School. Duma is a small town in northern New Jersey. It's a white town, small town. So they put me in ESL because they thought it was a good idea for me to meet more people, bless you, in the same situation as I was. So yeah, those kids were all Latinos, Spanish people like me. We would all speak in Spanish because those kids didn't know how to speak in English. Like, I was not going to speak to them in English. And so the other classmates who were not part of the ESL program started laughing at me because they thought I didn't know how to speak in English. So they would make comments about me, talk behind my back, and I was hearing what they were saying, and I would understand every single word. So so I started being the last one chosen for every single project, every single activity. Started feeling exclusion, started suffering from exclusion, because I was a Spanish girl who didn't know how to speak in English. And so, it was real bad, to be honest. And so one day, I had to do this project for whole class, and of course I had to do it alone. It was a final project, and I was terrified for speaking out loud in English. So yeah, I didn't want to do it. That same morning, I told my mom I was sick. She knew I was not sick, so she made me go to school. And so I remember I was listening to music right before that class, and this Eminem song popped up. And I remember when I was a little girl listening to all these artists, Eminem, Lady Gaga, Beyonce. Like, I was 8, I was back in Spain, I would print their lyric songs out and try to translate them, So, and I just realized I've been studying English for as long as these kids have. I just haven't had the practice because I was not speaking English at home. I was not speaking English to my friends. So that kind of pushed me to go up to the board and present. And so when I was there, I ruined everybody's expectations because, yeah, I kind of saw everybody getting red everybody's faces were red because they were like, wait, we've been cursing her out in English, and she actually knows how to speak in English. So yeah, good thing about being quiet. So I ruined everybody's expectations because I was the only one getting 100 in that project. And I was actually selected for the best student of the school year. So, thank you.
Thank you. All right, our next slammer, please welcome Janiyah Smith. Is she here? Janiyah, am I saying her name wrong? She's not here? Is she not coming? Not coming. Okay, how about Renee Smith? Is Renee Smith here? Give it up for Renee Smith. Right up so we can hear you.
So, thank you. Hi. So, growing up, I would live for weekends. Like, weekends were the best for me since that's when I was with my dad. Basically, my mom and dad had me at a young age. My mom was 19 and my dad was 23. So as soon as I was born, they separated. So when my mom, she would have me on weekdays and my dad would have me on weekends. And personally, I liked weekends. I was closer with my dad during the time. And plus, I was a foodie and I would eat all the food. I would eat all the jerk chicken, cabbage, rice and beans. If you know about the life, then you know. And first grade, that's when it completely changed for me. I remember the day I was sitting at the lunch table with my friends, and they were talking about, oh, like, if your mom and dad are not together, then you're not living the perfect life. Moms and dads are supposed to be together. And I'm just like, okay. And basically, they made fun of me because my parents weren't together. So as soon as I went home that day, and as soon as I got in the house, I asked my mom, why aren't you with my dad? And, sorry. And she basically said, you'll understand later. So I took matters into my own hands, and I decided to ask my dad. So I'm in the car with my dad, and I'm thinking, oh my God, should I ask him now? Should I ask him later? I'm not trying to get him mad. I'm trying to get food. I'm trying to get that jerk chicken. And then the next weekend, I decided to finally ask him. When I finally asked him, I remember him dropping his fork and told me to eat my food. It was hard for me. That whole entire night, I cried. I was really thinking all the possibilities, why my mom and dad weren't together. And it was hard for me because I really thought it was my fault. I thought that they broke up because of me because they had me at a young age. So I remember the next week comes by and my friends are at the lunch table and they're telling me how their mom and dad are arguing. And I'm like, oh my God, finally, I'm not the only one going through, but at the same time, I'm wondering why my mom and dad aren't together. And since I didn't know the answer and I was young and I was acting stupid, I decided to cut my dad my life. And it was hard because he was the person closest to me. I was closer to him, to my mom. So me seeing him every weekend turned out to be seeing him once every couple of months. And it was hard. I felt empty inside. I really didn't have no one to look to or talk to. I was just empty and I didn't talk to anyone about my feelings. I just kept everything inside. And now I'm trying to rekindle that friendship with my father since I've been holding that in for so long. And the American dream is always talking about how you should be with your family and how you should be married to a wife or a husband and then have kids and like one family's supposed to be together when you should just be worrying about being happy and worrying about your life and make sure that everything counts. And you have to worry about arguing, worrying about anyone else, just yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. Wow. All right. As a lifelong resident of Montclair, our next speaker's story is woven into the very fabric and lore of his beloved town. Having served our country during the Vietnam War, he continues to serve his community every day. Please help me welcome to the stage my friend, Mr. Clarence Jackson, with The Everlasting Story. Do you want to put it in the stand, or you want to?
Yeah, I'm gonna put it in the stand.
Okay.
I mean, I'm gonna.
You want to hold it? Okay. You want to put this in?
You know, part of relating the story is that you have to be a good listener to take in the story. And my mother pointed out to me what a good listener that I am just before she was about to administer some corporal punishment to my two brothers and myself. She stopped, and I called it divine intervention. And she said, I don't have to do this to Clarence, because Clarence listens. And I said, I do, I will. During the 1900s, my great uncle was in the physically demanding household goods moving business in Montclair. Jackson's Express said the painted gold letters on the side and back of the red moving vans. My grandfather, my father, myself, and sometimes a close family friend would do small jobs on Saturdays. And it was at this time that I learned the importance of hard work. My first job with my grandfather on a Saturday, I must have been, 12, 13 years old. And my grandfather said to me, Junior, go upstairs and bring me down a load on the job, and with the people moving from an upstairs apartment. So I went upstairs and I picked up this lamp. I got ready to come down the stairs, and this guy grabbed me. He said, boy, you don't go downstairs to Pop Jackson with just one thing in your hand. So he put something in this hand, he put something under this arm, he put something under this arm. Remember, like I said, my mother said I was a good listener, so I'm listening to him. But on my way down the stairs, I said, now wait till my grandfather sees this. Somebody's about to lose a job. So when I got downstairs, I walked up to the truck. My grandfather said, Junior, good boy, go upstairs and get another load just like that. And ever since then, on Saturdays, whenever my grandfather had some extra work, he would always call me because he knew that I was dependable. And after we finished one of those Saturday moving jobs, the crew would gather at my grandfather's house, and we would settle down into his basement den, which is connected to the kitchen. And we would have drinks, and we would tell stories about the challenges of the moving job that we just did or past moving jobs. And it was at one of these den moments that I first heard my father tell the story of his grandfather who had carried a car on his back. Now, I'm not talking about these new cars today made out of 20th century plastics. I'm talking about a car from the late 40s and early 50s, all metal, with bumpers that you could push a tank with. And my father was responding because, like I said, we were relating stories, and someone said to my father, I can't believe you had put that stove on your back and carried it up to the second floor apartment because the stairs were too narrow for two people to handle it. And my father said, put it on my back. And the guy said, I can't believe you did that. And he said, well, listen, my grandfather put a car on his back and carried it. I thought this was one of the biggest exaggerations my father had ever said. I never told anybody about that. I never told my mother. I mean, I didn't even try to brag to my friends. Hey, you know what my great-grandfather did? 19 years later, I'm living on Gates Avenue. My neighbor comes to get me. A rental car that he had was stuck in the neighbor's yard across the street. He said, I need you to help me get this car out. I'm like, what does he expect me to do? You know? And so I go outside, and it's raining, and I'm really ticked off. And we go in the backyard, and the backyard didn't have any grass. It was nothing but a lake of mud. And evidently, they had been attempting to get the car out, so the wheel was spinning, and now the wheel was stuck in a mud hole. But once again, I made an attempt. I tried to push the car, couldn't push it out. Then I saw 2 dry, rotted, wet logs, and I tried to create a lever, and the logs broke. So I stepped back, and I said to my neighbor, I guess you're going to have to call a tow truck. And he started shaking his head. I don't understand it. I don't understand it. And I said, what is it that you don't understand? He said, your grandfather would have lifted that car out of the mud. I said, I'm not my grandfather, but it's my great-grandfather. So now, 20 years later, this is why I call this a never-ending story. 20 years later, I'm on the job, and I'm sitting next to one of my coworkers who was a retired policeman. And out of the blue, he says to me, you know, at one time in Montclair, they had an unwritten policy that if you took a weapon from a police officer, they would let you go on the force. I said, wow, okay, I can believe that, you know. You heard the stories about in the Army, if you wanted to take the first sergeant's job, you just beat up the first sergeant. And then he turned and he said, but your grandfather went uptown with 6 weapons. I said, here goes that man again, you know? And so I'm trying to rationalize, how could you get away? I'm thinking today, now you know if you tried to take a weapon from a police officer, even though this was the early 80s, you might have gotten shot. But he had 6 weapons? I said, I don't know. Once again, another story that I never told anybody about that. 13 years later, I'm a student at Essex County College. My midterm exam, I had to do an oral presentation on the difference between a myth and a fairy tale. And in my research, I found out that a fairy tale has no truth to it at all. That's why they always start out with once upon a time, no specific time or date, in a forest, a village, a lake, no specific place. But whereas with a myth, there is some semblance of truth to a myth. And it's almost like the game of telephone. The story starts over here, but by the time it gets over here, it's a total different, but there is some basic that still remain the same. And so in my oral presentation, I've thought of the story of my great-grandfather, and I said, well, you know, at the end of my oral presentation, I said, there is some truth to the myth of my great-grandfather, because I did have a great-grandfather, and he was a very strong man. And in conclusion, I just want to say once again, the story comes up because I'm doing it for Story Slam. Thank you.
You're such a pro. That's great. Thank you, Clarence. All right, let's have up to the stage Jaden Walker. Jaden.
I got you. Hello, I'm Jaden Walker. Nice to meet y'all. Hope you're having a good night today. So, the American dream to me is excelling past expectations set by the public. So, I have some role models in my life, my mom, my brother, and my dad, of course. So my mother, she grew up in Newark, and you know, drugs were around her, poverty, and all these bad things. And she knew one thing. She had to escape. So what did she do? She kept her head down into books. She studied hard and hard and hard, but no one, well, besides her family, no one really believed that she could do it, that she could escape that. But she did, and she ended up in Ramapo where she met my dad, and so on and so forth. She ended up moving to Georgia, and she pointed out a building, and she said, you know what, I want to work there. And she ended up working there. It's crazy. But so now she's working for the government, and we're in Montclair, making a pretty decent salary, pretty good one. You know, living my best life off of her. But so for another story, I got my dad's. So my dad, he grew up in Montclair a long time ago. Not to say you're old. Not to say you're old. I love you. But, you know, it was a while back. It was a while back. It was different. So my dad, he's kind of like me in a way, you know. Likes to have fun like me. Wasn't the best student. But, you know, he did what he had to do to escape Montclair. And my dad, he had problems just like my mom, different. Even though he's in Montclair, he had differences. He had an over-controlling father who always looked over him and didn't want him to do what he wanted to do. And he had a brother. He got along with his brother, okay. But, you know, he had his problems, and he had to escape it. He had to find a way to get out. So he did what he had to do. Not as well as my mom, but he did what he had to do. And he made it to Ramapo College. He made it to Ramapo College. And, you know, he did his thing. And, you know, they moved to Georgia where they had me and my brother. Me and my brother are 5 years apart. We moved to Montclair when I was 2. And we're still in the same house ever since. And when I was younger, I don't remember what age I was, but we were on a car ride. We were on a car ride from IHOP, if I remember correctly. I was in the backseat with my brother, and he told us, he said, I'm leaving, if I remember correctly. I don't remember the story. And I felt the emptiness. I didn't understand. I didn't ask questions. I just kind of accepted it. But I didn't fully accept it. I didn't want to accept it, because he's been there. Think about it, from Georgia to Montclair, to elementary school, he was there, and he still is. He's still here, obviously. But he left. He didn't leave. I don't know how to explain. Like, he just doesn't live with us. So he left the house, and you know, he'll pop in and do what he had to do as a father. And but some of the things my brother had to step up for, and you know, obviously that would cause stress on my mom and make her sad. And seeing your brother do that, take up for some of the things your dad had to do, it kind of made me sad. It kind of hurt. It would anger anyone. Because if you think about it, it's like a child, because he's 5 years apart from me, and I was in elementary school, so he had to be in middle school, sometime in middle school, I don't remember. But that hurt me because he had to take on some of the roles or some of the responsibilities as a grown man, and that hurt me. And seeing your mom sad, that hurt me even more. So what comes after sadness? Anger. So I became angry. I didn't want to understand where he was coming from. I didn't want to listen to his side of the story. I didn't want to understand anything he had to do with it. So fast forward a couple years, and I'm talking to my grandfather, and you know, of course I got in trouble. I got in trouble for something. Like, I'm not a bad kid or nothing, but I always find myself in trouble. So I was talking to him, and he said the most profound quote I've ever heard him say. He said, and it's so simple, so simple. Listen to this, listen. He said, "This too shall pass." I was like, "This too shall pass?" I looked at him, because it was too simple. Like, I was like, what? You're supposed to give me like a quote like in the movie, something crazy. But this too shall pass. And then I went in my room that night and I thought. And I sat there and thought. I was like, this too shall pass, this too shall pass. And I realized my anger should pass. I should understand my dad. And then I thought about it, I was like, you know what? He still is here. He still does love us. He still does what he has to do as a father. And then, I don't know, I just sat there and I realized something. I don't really have an American dream. Because, I mean, when I said you have to excel past expectations, I mean, my only expectation is to succeed. So how do you surpass that? So I realized I got to add something to that. And I want to add love and acceptance. I want to love my life. I want to enjoy my life. I want to find someone to enjoy my life with, love. And then I want to accept something. I want to accept everything that comes with life. I want to accept the problems. I want to accept the failures. I want to accept this and I want to accept that. Whatever food falls on my plate, I want to accept it and love it. So that is my American dream. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jaden. All right, we only have a few stories left, but stay with us. We're almost there, and I have some great stories coming up for you. Our next speaker, please help me welcome to the stage, Denia Daniel. They're so anxious. They're coming up to me, saying, "Can I go next?"
Okay, so I'm like really nervous. I just made my story like 2 days ago, so, okay. Whew. So I just want to start off with like a little rap a little bit, okay? It was all a dream. I used to read Word Up magazine, Salt and Pepper and Heavy D up in the limousine. All right, that's all I'm gonna do. Just a little biggie, just a little bit, all right? So that kind of leadways into my story. So music has always been like a really important part of my life. I listen to music from all ranges. Like I listen to songs kind of like way back, like 60s sometimes through now. I just really love music. So, you know, whether I was happy, sad, mad, didn't know my emotions, just discombobulated or whatever, music just always made me feel comfortable, you know? I would always ask my dad, I remember I was super young, and I see it in my brother now, he's only 5 years old. I would always ask him, oh, can you change the station to the music? Because my dad loves music, but he loves his little sports radio, and I don't really want to hear all that, so I like my music. So now, you know, I just love music. So some of my earliest, you know, remembrance of music obviously is like the typical, you know, ABCs, 1, 2, 3s. But my first interaction with hip hop, which is my most loved genre, I remember being in the car and asking my dad. It was me, my dad, my oldest brother, and my sister. I have one sister. And I said, can you play this song? And I had proceeded to rap a lyric from the song on to the next one by Jay-Z featuring Swizz Beatz. I remember accidentally saying like a curse word and being scared that I was gonna get in trouble, but I just love the fact that I was able to recognize a song that I wanted to hear, and even to this day, I still love it. I grew up on so many amazing artists, but there is one that like really sticks out. Jay-Z, Hova, you know, whatever. So that was my dad's artist. Like he loved him a lot. Well, he still loves him. I remember just hearing songs by Jay-Z and wondering, where have I heard this before? And I remember this one time my cousin was like, oh, you heard it from your dad because he always listens to Jay-Z. My sister even says that she thinks that we were born to be Jay-Z fans. And I agree because Jay-Z is just a part of my life. So ever since my dad, I just feel like this made me grow into the person I am today because now I have my favorite artist. So, so at the top of the list, you know, Kendrick Lamar. I love Kendrick Lamar so much. If you know me, you know Kendrick is just my artist. I just love Kendrick Lamar. J. Cole's right there under him, and there's many other artists as well. J. Cole and Kendrick, they just empower me to feel like I can succeed and be who I want to be in this world as a young black woman. Well, yeah, young black woman, young adult, whatever. So Kendrick and J. Cole, they both have many songs that just empower people. Some songs from Kendrick, I'm just list 3. All Right, and The Blacker the Berry. They're just very songs that just empower you to be who you are in this world. Like I said, I wrote this 2 days ago, so I don't really have that much that I can say. But the American dream for me through them, Kendrick came from Compton. His family has been through a lot. Kid from Compton, and one of his best albums, Good Kid, Mad City, it just shows the life of him as a good kid in a mad city being Compton, just living in this world where it seems like you can't succeed past a certain limit. There's a song called The Art of Peer Pressure. In that song, he talks about how he just meets up with his friends and stuff, and usually in the song he goes through all these emotions about peer pressure and just drinking and smoking. Usually he's the sober kid, the good kid in the mad city, but because he's with his friends, this peer pressure is forcing him to do this. That's the mad city that's forcing him to do these things like that. And so it just pushes me, even though I am a kid from Montclair, I just seeing them and what they do and how they just push past all the limits that they've been through, I feel like it just inspires me to do more in my life. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Okay, our next slammer recalls an awkward time in her life when everything changed. With her story, My War with Fan, please welcome Ms. Josie Zeman. Do you want to hold it? Yeah, hold it. It's because you can hold it. Hold it right up.
I don't need another mother. That's what I told my father when he announced he was marrying this widow from Nashville, barely a year after my mother died. I was 17, a senior in high school, a transplanted Yankee living in Louisville, Kentucky. It was 1959. My first impression of this woman who was going to become my stepmother, oh my, she's wearing too much turquoise eyeshadow. I looked at her. She was short. She had a lot of black hair done up in a big bouffant hairstyle, heavily tanned, wore a lot of makeup, and a lot of gold bracelets that clinked and clanked with every step. She had that soft, southern, drawling accent. How was she going to compare to my mother? My mother was tall and stately. She had light brown hair pulled back into a small twist. She wore very little makeup, hardly any jewelry, and her voice was distinct with those crisp New England tone. That began the very unfair comparison between my mother and my stepmother. My mother read widely in many fields. She was up to date on the latest trends in art, music, and her first love, the theater. She enjoyed talking to my friends about their goals and their interests. My stepmother never read anything much at all. She looked at the newspaper only for the coupons. She liked card games and soap operas on television, and she never had much to say to my friends. Now, my stepmother had two daughters of her own who were still living in Nashville. They didn't live with us. They were size 4 petite little princesses who wore pastel dresses and little ballerina flats on their dainty feet. I was a perfect size 14. And I wore sensible brown and white Oxfords on my size 10 feet. My girls walk like they're walking on eggshells, honey, and I can hear you coming a mile away. Well, I said, I don't think I'm ever going to learn to walk like I'm walking on eggshells. And why do you read so much? You're going to ruin your eyes, she would say as I clumped by with a stack of books. Well, how else am I going to learn anything? But eventually, we settled into an uneasy arrangement. She insisted that I come home for dinner every night at 6 o'clock. At that time, I was studying at the University of Louisville in the downtown campus. I didn't want to, but I figured I'd keep the peace. And oh, I remember those dinners. My father, who usually only ate steak and a baked potato, dove into red snapper and Creole sauce and green beans, practically drowning in cream of mushroom soup. My brother and my stepbrother, who at that time were about 14, they didn't care about anything except getting enough food to eat. You'd pass the platters down to their end of the table, you'd hear a crunching sound, and the plates never came back. Then they would retreat to their private sanctuary, their room, which was full of posters of movie stars, and there were motorcycle magazines everywhere. My stepmother tried, but she was so critical of me. My hair wasn't right. I didn't wear enough makeup. My clothes were too sloppy. What are my friends going to think if they see you looking like that, she said to me one day. And I responded by telling her she was old-fashioned and her ideas were completely outdated. Then it came around summertime, and we piled into the Oldsmobile for the long trip back to the family beach house in Connecticut. It was a 2-day drive in those days. We were about a half an hour from the beach when my stepmother asked my father to stop and let her out at a convenience store and gas station. She was wearing rumpled Bermuda shorts and an old shirt. She was carrying one of those dry cleaning bags with a blue outfit in it and her little makeup case. And while my stepbrother and my brother and I wiggled in boredom in the back seat, she disappeared to the ladies' room. And she came out 10 minutes later, beautifully dressed in a blue linen matching skirt and jacket. Her hair was done, her makeup was on, and there were the gold bracelets. When we got into the beach community, my mother's old friends came around, very curious to meet this woman who was supposedly taking her place. And I heard one of the women say in a stage whisper, "Everything she's wearing is all wrong for the beach. This is not a fancy hotel in Miami. Doesn't she know how to dress? And can anybody understand her in that accent?" That's when I began to realize they were judging and criticizing her, just like I had done for the last year. And I knew that it was uncomfortable for my stepmother, that she couldn't turn into someone else. She was who she was. But it wasn't until I became a mother myself that I really grew to appreciate her. I understood her opinions, I valued her experience, and when my second child was born, and I was kind of overwhelmed, she came and stayed with us for about a week to help me out. Now I'm a grandmother myself, but I still remember some of her rules. Be nice to your sister-in-law, even if you don't like her, because you're family now. You can always get 2, sometimes 3 cups of tea out of a tea bag. And on a cold winter's day, the best dinner is a big bowl of homemade vegetable soup. And her favorite saying, "Anybody can pay full price. Look for bargains and save your coupons." Thanks, Fan. I'm glad you were part of my life.
Thank you, Josie. Okay. I have a few more students. Do we still have Caleb Johnson in the house? Caleb Johnson? Caleb Johnson? Come on up here.
Good evening, everybody. All right. So I moved here from Georgia, and I got here in 2nd grade. When I first got here, I didn't really know anybody, and I was upset because I had left all my friends. But fortunately, I made a lot of new friends, and I'm so happy now that I moved. But I'm not going to be talking about that today. Today I'm going to be talking about how music is my passion and how it's my American dream. So I always knew I had a connection to music, but it was only last year I realized how strong that connection was. It was a regular day at first. My boy Samir said we were going to be hanging out with my friend Kelly, who had made beats. And I wasn't really close to Kelly at the time, but we were close enough to where we could hang out. So we went over his house, and first we just hung out, ate, chilled. And then he asked if we wanted to go into his room where he made his beats. And of course we were like, yeah. So Kelly had been showing off some of his recent projects, and Samir had said I should get on a beat and rap on it, because I freestyle from time to time. And I had said yes. Kelly puts on a beat, and keep in mind at this point, more of my friends had came over, so I was getting kind of nervous, but I just got into it and I started rapping. And I was doing good. I had never done that good in front of that amount of people, and that day I realized I wanted to rap. I've since then, I've been working on music more and doing more freestyles, recording, and I've been trying different beats and just perfecting my craft. Right now it's sort of a hobby, but this summer I'm planning on putting music on SoundCloud because one of my friends has a studio, and yeah. I've been recording in my room lately though, and I've been editing it, going over it, taking parts out and adding parts in, and then finally re-recording it. I haven't gotten a fully finished product yet, but that's because like I don't have a good place to record. And when I do like finally record my finished product, I want it to be like crisp and like nice. So, and I know the music industry is like a very competitive thing to get into now, and like nowadays everybody wants to rap or sing or like get rich off of like that easily. But regardless, I love making music, and that in and of itself drives me. And even doing that, like as a hobby, like I love doing that and it makes me happy. So I'm gonna keep doing it, money involved or not.
Thank you so much. All right, can I have everyone welcome Andrea Rourke to the stage? Andrea Rourke. Do we have Andrea Rourke here? Come on down. It's funny, we all have papers, they all have phones.
Okay, so, okay. Okay, hold on, sorry. Sorry, I'm really nervous. So, I'm Andrea, and I was born in Guatemala, and I don't remember coming to America because I was 7 months old, and everybody always says that you don't remember things until you're about 4 years old. So I can remember when I was 5 and I lived in the city with my other Guatemalan friends, and it feels like just yesterday we were all hanging out together with no worries. I remember moving to Montclair and everything was different, from the people to the town, and it was not like being in the city anymore, so it was like really different, and I didn't have my friends. So my mom is white, and to be honest, it's like, it used to make me kind of like uncomfortable. And I'm not saying I have an issue with white people, because I think everybody's should be equal and everybody's the same. But it can be hard growing up with someone who doesn't look the same as you, and as that person being your parent is kind of like weird. So I don't know what age I remember thinking I was adopted, because I think part of me always knew. I just gained more knowledge of it growing up, and I'm still learning about myself and my adoption today. Up until the 6th grade, all my friends were white, and I didn't really hang out with like any other kids. Like I wasn't really diverse in my choice of like having friends and stuff like that. And I remember going to these cookouts, and these people were like family friends, and everybody else was white there, and I was the only like colored person there, and nobody made me feel like different, but sometimes I could just like feel it be awkward even if nobody said anything. I've gotten used to it by now, and it's okay now, and things changed after 6th grade, because I guess now I'm only friends with more colored kids and not many white people. Maybe I'm just weird by saying this, and I'm not really sure, but I just always felt like the odd one out. And not growing up with people who look like you and people who are different than you can be confusing for a kid, and it can sometimes feel lonely. And not growing up with siblings or dad made it even more complicated for someone who I maybe wanted to be or even try to be. And I'm not going to sit here and complain about the life I've had, because I've had this amazing opportunity to be in America, but sometimes I just wish I've lived something different and had more people to like be the same as me. And I think having like, it's just like me and my mom at home, and sometimes that's just like hard, I guess, because I don't have,
Sorry. I don't have somebody else. And yeah.
Whew. All right. Do we still have Brianna Worthy here? She left? Are there any other students? Yes. Hashara Garrett. Who is this? Hashara Garrett? Yes. Come on up.
Hi, everybody. Okay, so mine is like kind of like a poem a little bit in the beginning. So, right. Who am I? What am I to do? I've lost who I am. I look in the mirror and I don't see the me I used to be. I don't see the girl that was so desperate to be different that she became like everyone else. And she thought that maybe if she did things that would make her stand out, she'd be somebody that mattered. But even after she did everything that she did and she tried so hard, she still didn't matter. She wasn't popular or that important. And she didn't have an overabundance of friends, and she wasn't as loved as some others may have seemed, or as welcomed as she thought she should have been. Instead, she had people judging her and telling her that she was trying too hard and she was doing everything in her power to fit in with everyone else. She would now, but this time when she realized everything that she was going through, she saw that she wasn't an outcast anymore. Now everyone saw her, but they saw her for the wrong reasons. People now know her as the one with a short temper, or the girl that likes to fight, or the girl with a bad attitude if you rub her the wrong way. She is me, but I'm not her. I am Hashara Imani Danae Garrett. I am Hashara. I like to dance, and I like to write, and I like to sing, and I like to do all these things. And I didn't know I liked to act until 2 years ago, because my teacher said, have you ever thought of like trying to get an outlet? And I didn't think it was gonna work. I tried so hard to put it off and to dislike it because no one else around me liked acting, and no one else around me took dancing serious, or they took chorusing serious. Everyone thought, oh, if you do that, then you're prissy or something. And I didn't want to be seen as a weak person. I didn't want to feel vulnerable. I don't like feeling vulnerable. I used to try so hard to try to please everyone else rather than please myself. I wasn't content with the life that I was living. But I learned from my grandmother, and I learned from my aunt, and I learned from my uncle that just because you don't have the life that everyone else has, it doesn't make you any worse than them. It doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't mean that you should be put aside and cast out. I learned that I'm my own person, and I should be happy with that. I should be content with some of the fact that some people have both parents and but their parents aren't there for them. Their parents don't really take care of them, and I'm glad that mine does. My grandmother works so hard for both my sister and I know that sometimes I don't appreciate that. And sometimes I'll get my little attitudes and I'll be like, oh my gosh, she's getting on my nerves. But at the end of the day, she's taking care of me and she cares for me and teaching me how to care for myself. So now when I want to turn up or get rowdy on somebody, I have to step back and think, that's not for me to do, because that's not who I'm going to be. That's not how I want people to see me as. I want to be the person wow, oh, these people are arguing with her. She's really holding her ground. She's so calm, and she's not acting like everyone else. She's not acting like a hood rat, and she's not acting like she's from the ghetto. She's not acting. She can be calm, and she can be polite, and she can have manners. And that's the person who I strive to be and who I'm trying to represent, because each day when I walk out of my house, I'm not just representing myself, I'm representing my family and the background and the people that raised me. So that's who I am.
All right, that brings us to our final story slammer. And he is going to take us back to the innocence of his childhood on the streets of Newark with his story, Lasting Friendship. Please help me welcome Mr. Charlie Earl. No, you're going to stand up here. Just so you're on camera. Okay.
Just all right. Hello. If someone raises an eyebrow when they learn that my old girlfriend Peggy and I share a room when we go to Atlantic City, I just say, oh, for God's sakes, our affair was over by the time we were 6. You see, back in 1935 or 1936, when Peggy and I were both 4 or 5, my family moved into her apartment house on Broadway in Newark. Now, Broadway was a very busy street. Lots of stores, lots of cars and buses. But right next to the apartment, there weren't just empty lots, there were real woods that went block after block all the way down to the Passaic River. Now, Peggy and I and all the kids that lived in the apartment, we lived in those woods. We would build huts and make fires, roast potatoes, and in the winter, we'd sleigh ride down real killer hills. On Saturday, we kids would go to the Elwood movie, which was 2 blocks down the street. The Elwood movie, I remember when it only cost 9 cents. So if you had a dime, you had a penny left over for penny candy. And penny candy was available in stores all around the neighborhood. I remember the Red Hots, the Green Leaves, the Jawbreakers, and my favorite, the licorice slabs with hard candy dots on them. Anyway, and for that dime, our parents could get rid of us for all of Saturday. You see, the Elwood, like most movies at the time on Saturday, showed 2 movies, newsreel, travelogue, cartoon, and coming attractions, and of course the serial. Now the serial was an episodic thing, ran every week, and at the end, you know, the great white hero was murdered in some horrible way. He'd either get blown up or crushed between mountains of rocks. But when you had to go back the next week to find out how he escaped, and of course he always did miraculously. Now, the highlight of the year was really on New Year's Eve. Peggy's mother would take Peggy and me to the midnight show at the Elwood. Besides the thrill of just staying up so late, we had the opportunity to sing along with the crowd all the old songs, you know, Old Lang Syne, and you didn't even have to know the words. You just followed the bouncing ball on the screen. You probably don't know what I'm talking about. Now, Peggy and I both went to the same Catholic grammar school, and we still hung together all through high school, although we went to different schools. I went to Barringer, Peggy went to Central. Now, after high school, our lives took different paths, but Peggy was married young, started having babies. I went into the Navy as a journalist for 2 years, and when I came out, I moved to Montclair with my family. I also lived and worked in New York City for 15 or so years, working as a writer for different companies. But ultimately, well, not ultimately, but I got married to a New York girl named Betty. And ultimately, we wound up in Virginia, where I taught writing at a community college for 25 years. But even during the Virginia years, we two Northerners would go back north to visit family, and we'd always wind up getting together with Peggy and her husband, Jack. We all became really good friends. Now, after 25 years of teaching, I retired in 1995. And after I retired, we moved back to Montclair. Now, Jack died some years ago, and my wife Betty just a couple of years ago. But Peggy and I still remain loving friends. We talk on the phone a lot. We get together for lunch once or twice a month, quite often at Tierney's Tavern on Valley Road. Everybody knows Tierney's Tavern, right? This year, we even spent New Year's Eve together again. No bouncing ball, just a nice dinner out. I'm reminded of a quote that I always liked by a writer of the 50s called Clifford Irving, and it goes, "To know and love another person for nearly 25 years, nearly 50 years rather, is a pleasure unequaled in this world." So according to Mr. Irving, I am doubly blessed. I haven't known Peggy for 50 years. We've known one another for 83 years. Now, that number even surprises me. So, I guess if you really nurture the friendships you already have or the ones you're making now in high school, with a little bit of luck and good health, maybe you can also be so blessed. I certainly wish that for all of you.
Thanks, Charlie. Thank you. Thank you, Charlie. So tonight, you witnessed firsthand the powerful art of storytelling. Together, we shared our truths, our secrets, our transformations, and our triumphs. Some big, some small, and many of them very similar. Thank you, audience, for holding these folks so caringly in your hearts. And thank you, Story Slammers, for being so brave and facing your fears and sharing your truths with us. Remember, you all have a story to tell. We'll see you next year. Thank you so much.